All right. Hello there. Welcome to our first ever Fireside Book Club uh, meeting because we are part of the Fireside. If you don't know, we have a Discord together. That is Josh from Red Fairy Books underneath me from where I am, Matt on Books, who's here, and Armand, Evie. And we decided we're going to start a quarterly book club together. So what we did is each of us chose a book, and then we put it out to the Fireside to vote for which book they wanted us to read together. And the book I chose won, which is Blindsight by Peter Watts.
So
And
everything that's about to happen is Joanna's fault.
it's my fault.
Actually, really,
Entirely
it's
Joanna's fault.
the Fireside Discord's fault because
That's true.
democracy
That's
should
true.
not be trusted.
Yeah, that's true.
Democracy should not be trusted.
Yeah, that's true.
I have to say, though, I mean, if you missed my thoughts, I did post my spoiler-free thoughts on my last video, which came out yesterday or day before yesterday. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. As I said there, I think I might have been the most positive about this book. And I'm not saying it was like a favorite of all time by any means, but I thought it was interesting what the book went for. And at the same time, I'll just say, for my own part, I thought this was a challenging read. And I was just telling the others here that I've been so grateful to some of my sci-fi friends here on BookTube that they have also said that this was a challenging read for them. So I don't feel like as ashamed to say that because I thought, oh wow, is it just me? Am I? And this is testing my intelligence level here. I'm not sure I'm following every detail. So I'm sure there are little plot twisty things that I didn't quite catch, but on the whole, we're going to talk about this book spoiler-free starting out and get into general thoughts and interpretations, and then get into spoilers. So before I do that, while I do that, while I introduce my guests here, while I have my guests introduce themselves, I'm going to go ahead and just go into the chat. So thank you all so much for being here. Just to have my other guests introduce themselves, we'll start going with below me with Josh. Want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, hi, I'm Josh, Red Fury Books. Do we want to talk about the book a little bit? Or...
Yeah, let's do that. Let's go ahead and just say some general thoughts about the book, spoiler-free, what you thought about it.
Yeah, I think of the panel based on what I've seen in our chats and everything. I think I'm going to be the one in the middle for the most part. I liked a lot of this book. I really liked probably the first 2/3 of the book. And then I thought the ending really fizzled. I was waiting for this big, profound moment to happen, and it didn't. So I was disappointed in that. I kept comparing it to, we can talk probably a little bit more in the spoiler section, Solaris by Stanislav Lem. I don't know. I know, Joanna. I know
I love that book.
Yes. I mean, there were some interesting parallels there, but I thought like Solaris did pretty much everything better. The thing is, so we were talking about the difficulty of this book. It is a very difficult book because it's very hard sci-fi, but I didn't approach it that way. When I read very hard sci-fi, I have the attitude that I honestly don't care if I don't understand the scientific side of it. So if I can't pick up what they're talking about from a science standpoint through context clues, I just keep reading. And that's always been my attitude for hard sci-fi and steampunk. And for me, that's what I had to do with this, because he goes kind of off the deep end. And it's very intricate. It's very hard science. And I just kind of glossed through that. But even doing that, I actually like the writing. And I know that's kind of an unpopular opinion based on what I saw on the Discord, that a lot of people didn't like the writing. I liked the writing maybe because I wasn't dwelling on the things that I didn't understand. Like, there are some fantastic passages in second person. They're incredibly effective in this book. And I generally hate that. I usually think when someone writes in second person, they're just trying to show off that they can write in second person, and it pulls me out of the story. And I'm not a fan of it in general, but here it works perfectly. So, I mean, I liked so much of it, but the ending just didn't do anything for me. So it was kind of a book that I was thinking, oh, this is pretty good. And then it just kind of ended up, you know, if I did my tier list, it would be like in my mid tier, where like there were a lot of things I liked, but overall, you know, it's not something that's a favorite of mine.
Yeah, I'll just quickly respond to that. I agree with you. I actually thought that the writing worked very well for what Watts was doing. It was heavy in biological jargon and some jargon, I think, related to physics that I had to that kind of threw me off a little bit here and there, but for the most part, I thought that it supported the story very well. For me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of second person narration, and it wasn't egregious in the story for me, but I did not care for it either. It did pull me out every time it was used. But I mean, at the same time, I got used to. I understood the purpose of it. It just wasn't my favorite thing. But yeah, I appreciated your thoughts, Matt. What about you?
I was very mixed on this book. I found it. I found it very inconsistent in a way. There were a lot of bits that were very character focused. Like, I don't think it's a spoiler to say there's something going on now, and then there's a lot of flashback bits, especially with the main character. You get their background, and you get more and more as it goes along through flashbacks. And the flashbacks were very character focused and not at all generally full of incomprehensible jargon. And then the now bits were pretty much 50% full of incomprehensible jargon and hard to grasp concepts and stuff like that. By the end, I had the feeling that Peter Watts was doing something very interesting, which we can get into in more detail when we get into the spoiler part. But I'm not sure it landed. And I don't necessarily mean like objectively landed, but landed for me. I probably would have DNF'd this if we were not doing the book club. If it wasn't a book club book, I probably would have gotten to a point where I was like, this is interesting, but I'm just not really enjoying it. But I pushed on, and I'm glad I did. I agree with Josh. The ending was kind of like, yeah, okay. Not so exciting or impressive, and wasn't satisfying as an ending. But overall, I thought it's a very interesting book, but I can't say that I really enjoyed reading it.
All right. Yes. Excellent. Well said, Matt. You're bringing up a lot of interesting things too related to the structure of the book, which I think we should talk about too soon, because it does take on an unusual structure. It is told in first-person narration. Our character who's telling the story is telling this from the future, from where you end up at the end of the book. And he's giving to you fragments of what's happening in a present timeline while they are on this spaceship called the Theseus. I'm not sure if I'm saying that word right. They're on the spaceship that's trying to make contact with an alien vessel. And then there also are fragments from series past, from his childhood on. And so it does feel a little bit it might feel jarring for some readers, I think, because you are going back and forth in this character's perspective.
And also it kind of reminded me of, in only one way, reminded me slightly of Book of the New Sun, because the first person narrator in this book I found to be extremely unreliable.
Yes.
Like, I did not trust what he was telling me ever through the entire book. I'm like, you've got a very, very weird perception and perspective, and I think that's coloring what you're telling me quite a lot.
Absolutely. Yes. Excellent. And we're going to go to Evie's thoughts. Really quickly, I did answer this question, but Capricious Thought Fox asked, so you guys won't be reading the second book in the series. I think all of us are. No. I'm glad I read this book personally, but I personally don't have plans to read the second one. And I think, everybody there.
I don't regret it either. I mean, there was enough in there that I enjoyed, but
it was interesting. I'm always actually excited. Even if I don't necessarily enjoy it that much, I'm always personally excited to experience a book that's doing something different, and doing things a bit differently than I'm used to. I don't always want everything to be comfy and, something that I'm familiar with. So I liked it in that sense. I just didn't really enjoy the read,
Yeah. Excellent. All right, Evie, tell us your thoughts.
I'm going to have very little thoughts, and I'm going to be listening to you because I read this And pretty quickly, I realized this is not jiving with me. The writing style wasn't jiving with me. The character wasn't jiving with me. So I wound up listening to it on audio just to force myself to finish it. And to be honest, words went in one ear and out the other. And even watching like reviews and like reminding myself what happened, I'm like, I still have no idea what happened. Even after watching people's videos, like I'm like, what the hell happened in this book? So it just did not click with me in any way, shape, or form. And I'm so sorry.
That's okay. We appreciate hearing your thoughts, and regardless of all that, I'm sorry it wasn't a pleasant read for you. But I can also understand what you're saying, Evie. I think that this book, as I said in my review, I think it could be challenging for some readers, not only because of the hard sci-fi elements of the story, and not only because of the structure and the way it's told, but also because we're given this story in first person from a character who's very emotionally detached. We learn this probably isn't a spoiler to say because we get it as early on as in the prologue. We learn that this character has undergone a certain surgery. From what I understand, it's to remove epilepsy from the brain, and therefore, and correct me if anybody understood that differently. But basically, we get what appears to be a sociopath through this character, and he seems to understand the
that
world.
was one thing. There are two things, and maybe I'll get into the second one when we get more spoilery. But that was one thing where I was just like, so this is a high-tech future. And in this high-tech future, the way you cure someone from epilepsy is by removing half of their brain? Really? Seriously?
And it's
Am I
only
meant to believe
like
this?
years, and it's only like 60 years from now too. I always have trouble with that when they pick a date and everything seems so far advanced, and you can't potentially get.
It's like we're not going to be there in 60 years.
It's kind of like Back to the Future Part 2.
I mean, it's a constant problem with science fiction. Like you probably do want to put a date in there, and your date is going to look ridiculous by the time that date comes to the people living in that time. You know.
Well, it's also just for that premise, like the idea of curing epilepsy is to remove part of the brain. Like that just also seems very dated because that's what they did with lobotomies back in the 40s.
It seems like a 50 years ago idea.
Not
or even further, 75 years ago, 100 years ago. Sure. If you tell me that like at the turn of the century, at the beginning of the 20th century that they did that, I'd be like, okay. But like, how is that the solution in the future? It just felt like it pulled me out of the story a bit because it was clear that the author wanted a protagonist that has this weird perspective on the world, and the way they got that protagonist was by removing half their brain, which seems like unnecessary today and especially unnecessary in the future.
It also makes me wonder how much of it is supported by neuroscience in a way. It's like, okay, like, I don't know. It's just the fact that they're operating on such a high level, but still it's just like completely removed from all emotional or any sense of empathy or any sense of understanding human nature in a deeper way or emotional connection. I don't know. It just part of me questions things. It's like, is it really that simple where you just remove a part of the brain and that happens? I mean, maybe, but maybe there's more complexity to that. You know what I mean? Like kind of like how we understood the right brain, left brain at one point in time, and now we debunked
I'm no neuroscientist, but I've read a little, and I'm absolutely certain that you have a lot more problems than being somewhat detached if someone has removed half of your brain.
Probably.
Like, yeah, that bit, a lot of his other scientific stuff, I was like, I don't really know enough to know, but I can kind of buy it. But starting with that, and that's why our protagonist is kind of weird, I was like, really?
Yeah.
It's the future and they're cutting out half of people's brains? I don't know.
Funny. Yeah, it's just interesting the way that they explored that. Although I have to say, I mean, if we just go along with it, like, okay, well, let's just suspend our disbelief. There were some moments that were pretty uncomfortable, and again, like you said, Matt, the unreliable narrator factor also made me question certain things about this character as well, and how he was saying he interpreted the world and how detached he seemed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting that way. Before we get into spoilers, of course, let's see. So Dave says here, I find the thought expressed at the end to be existentially terrifying. Yeah, so we will get into that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I did like how how alien, because it's a first contact story, how alien the alien felt, and its level of consciousness was so different than ours. I said on my review, on my wrap up, this isn't a first contact story with like little green men and take me to your leader and all of that. This is a truly alien consciousness, and that's something I did really enjoy about this book.
I just read a book with a little green man, so which is cool too. I like that too. But I have to say that I agree with you, and in that way, I think we brought up Solaris was brought up in the chat earlier. We talked about that. Yes, that's a first contact story too, where I feel like I love it when sci-fi authors science fiction authors go there when they're able to depict such a non-anthropomorphized version of consciousness. And that's hard to do because authors are human. So it's like, how do you imagine consciousness outside of your own?
Writing a consciousness that is completely in every way different from our own is obviously difficult.
Alien.
Kind of alien, yeah. I think the first contact book I ever read was years and years ago. I read Footfall by Larry Niven, and it's kind of weird. It's the aliens are basically somewhat like elephants, and their mentality is hard to understand because they have literally a herd mentality, more like Earth animals, but it's still there's kind of a relatable level where, like, if you understand animals a bit, Earth animals a bit, you can kind of understand the aliens. And this, I also really appreciated this, where I was just like, I have no idea what the hell's going on with these aliens for like half the book, 2/3 of the book. They're just like so alien that I really just don't get them at all,
Yeah, it was a little, in fact, that was a little confusing for me at times in the book, because it seemed like the characters were interpreting their behaviors and you were trying to see if that was accurate. I don't know. I was constantly wondering, are these just guesses, or I don't know how to make sense of what's actually happening versus the interpretation on the page.
Well, and also I thought it was really impressive that basically the crew, I had a really clear feeling that nobody on the crew even knows what's going on for almost the whole book. They were also just like best guessing it all the way through, and that also totally made sense and was interesting.
That seemed to be the case. Before we get into spoilers, because there's a lot to say spoiler-wise when it comes to that and the contact itself, I would say this is definitely a first contact story, so that's worth mentioning here. Before we get into that, though, this story explores vampires. And to be honest, when I think about the book, that's actually the last thing I think about, even though there is a vampire character that is important in the story. Thoughts about vampires in this book and this version of vampire?
They to me, they go with we removed half of Ciri's brain.
Yeah.
Like I was like, okay, there are vampires, and when it becomes clear why and how there are vampires, I just didn't buy it. I was like, it in a book that is trying very hard mostly to be quite scientific and is throwing a lot of scientific jargon at you and logic and all this sort of stuff. And then he's invented a vampire race that existed in the Pliocene era. I was like, what are you talking about?
Like, on paper, I'll be honest, that was one of the things that drew me to this. It was like, oh, this sounds like just so out there. Okay, yeah. Like part of the crew is a vampire that they've, replicated the genes from, this extinct race that actually existed. And then, yeah. No, I feel the same way. I don't feel it really fit in there.
You know, it's funny because I didn't think about this as deeply until today. I did my review and I did say, yeah, I was interested in this book because of space vampires or whatever. And I mean, I did appreciate the role that a certain vampire character played in the story, but the fact he was a vampire and the fact that like we're getting these little info dumps about how vampires work and how it's the biology of that works, that is scientifically explained in the story. But at the same time, like when I look at, because I always like do a handwritten review, which is a little more in depth than what I talk about on camera. But I that's actually not, I didn't even focus on that. Like that's not even what I think about. I feel like it's almost extraneous. It felt for me extraneous to the story he was telling.
I've
Was
felt,
it necessary?
I felt as the time, I read this the very beginning of the month. So it's been, like 5 weeks since I finished it or whatever. I found as I was just kind of thinking about it this morning that most of the secondary characters have pretty much faded from my thoughts.
Yep.
So not just the vampire, but
I had a hard time while I was reading it, keeping them clear. It's like, okay, one of them's a vampire. I get that. And the other one's Siri. And then there's 3 other people.
There's like a doctor, there's a fighter.
Yeah, who kind of do stuff. I don't really know who they are.
It's a D&D campaign? What?
Right?
It did feel a bit role-playing game to me. Yeah.
It was a little bit of a struggle for me to keep all of that straight, especially because one of the people had different consciousnesses. That's not really a spoiler.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that character. Yeah. That character was actually quite fascinating, and
that was kind of cool. Yeah,
my memory in a month. So
I have some thoughts about that actually, which I want to make sure. Are we pretty much? Let's see.
I think we can go to spoilers.
I think we're ready to go into spoilers. I'll go ahead and quickly catch up here, though. I was rooting for the mountain in the sea to win the vote. I saw that Jimmy Nuts read that and talked about it in his last wrap up, and he made it sound like it was a little bit of a stretch to call that a first contact story, but he was very positive about it. So it did sound intriguing. And I love the book. I kind of am curious about getting to it.
I saw someone in Alan's Discord recently said it's their favorite sci-fi book.
Wow.
I'm a huge sucker for a awesome cover. And the UK cover of that with like this mountain, which is an octopus. I saw it in a bookstore, like physically in a bookstore, and I was like, I'm gonna get that eventually.
The US cover, oddly enough, I prefer the US cover of Mountain in the Sea.
Okay.
I'm really excited to read it. But yeah, no, so I highlighted Mitch's and Bart's comments. So I actually looked it up, the Mayo Clinic. There is like what did Bart call it? Hemispherectomy. Yeah. Like it does part of the brain, and part of the risk is mood and personality changes. Yeah. So I guess it's not as far-fetched as at least he wrote it. So
it's not insane, but I also would think, I don't know, maybe I'm just used to things like that being more advanced and better in the future in science fiction books.
I was surprised to learn recently that they still do shock therapy. I had no idea that was still a thing. I was like, that's still a thing? So I don't know. I'm surprised all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the correction, Mitch and Bart, and Evie for looking that up for us. I'm glad to know that that is a thing. We always want to be informed about these things because, but I can understand your criticism as well, Matt, that you would think maybe in the future that would be a little more advanced than it is. I learned more about 3D forums from Stellaris than I learned.
Supposed to be Solaris.
He means Solaris, yeah.
Oh, sorry, Solaris.
Stellaris is a video game that he and I both play. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which also has a lot of weird aliens in it, but not what he's talking about.
Interesting. Okay, so we're not alone in this. That's, I don't know. I would love to hear different takes about this. I honestly haven't watched any video reviews about this book, and it would be really interesting to hear more of like an in-depth analysis about the vampires and why that's so integral to the story. That was just something that escaped me for some reason. Like when I look at the book now, I'm like, okay, why was that part of the book? Because
Curl has a comment towards the bottom there. Like apparently he came up with it as a separate project and then just like mushed it in together with this one.
We can also ask Jerome. Jerome thinks the vampires are awesome, so we can ask him why he thinks
Yeah,
they're
please
awesome.
tell us about that, though, Sharon.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about that as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess
Yeah.
one of the with the vampires, one of the things I guess I'm very used to from reading a lot of science fiction is that the future is made up, but everything else isn't. You know, like what happened before the future isn't made up. It's like this is the world we have, and this is how it developed. That's made up. This isn't. You know, and this was like, oh, by the way, an intelligent bipedal species existed in the Pliocene and died out. And we're like, really? Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, we are going to go from here into spoilers. So if anybody in the chat doesn't want to be spoiled, then thank you so much for being here, and maybe come back to this when you've read the book, if you read it, or if you don't mind spoilers, hang out with us. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I missed something with just in full transparency. I feel like I missed something with the vampire stuff. It seems to me like maybe there is a very important integral piece with the vampires. Though again, like I said, I do feel like Sorosty, who's the main vampire character, if I'm saying his name right, is he did have some very important conversations in this book for sure. All right, thank you, Anita. All right, so going into spoilers here, I want to bring up, first of all, I want to break up the Chinese room experiment, and I think that could have been in the non-spoiler section, but I think it's also important for understanding what's going on.
It's a central concept of the whole book. Yeah,
it really is. I could try to explain the Chinese experiment, but if anybody wants to jump in and give a better answer than me, please feel free. But I did watch some videos about this. There are like 2-minute videos you could look up on YouTube. But the idea here, as I said it in my video, it's the difference between understanding like high order intelligence understanding versus just computational intelligence. Like the difference between having a conversation, like if I have a conversation with Evie and she understands what I'm saying and she understands the nuances of my emotions and tone, and she has a deep level of empathy, I suppose, or communication with me, versus like if I talk to an AI version of Evie who might respond very similar to how the real Evie would respond in some ways, but that AI Evie, sorry Evie, I'm using you as an example, that AI version doesn't really understand there's no understanding there.
You know, it's I'd never heard of this concept before, and I think it's I think it's amazing. I don't know where it originated, but it brought me back personally to like when I was finishing up, my study of Spanish in high school. My teacher could talk to me in Spanish. I could respond perfectly with perfect grammar, with a perfect vocabulary, and I had no idea what I was saying because I had learned just the tricks of you reply to this with this, and this tense turns into this, but I didn't know what I was saying. And I saw that in here. It brought me back. I was like, yeah, I remember that. And it made total sense to me how someone could figure out the rules of conversation or whatever, figure out all the vocabulary, but not understand any of it at all. And when that was revealed, I thought that was when I was still enjoying the book. So I liked that part of the story a lot.
I did too, because that was how they were that was their way. They were trying to understand when they were communicating. I think it was the character Michelle was throwing out nonsensical information at this alien vessel, Rorschach, which is it Rorschach or Rorschach? Rorschach, like a Rorschach test?
Rorschach.
Rorschach. I always get the R's mixed up in that word. But yes, kind of like a Rorschach test where you're looking at the ink. That's like the ink blot test, right? Where you're always interpreting something. And so it's basically, she was basically throwing out nonsensical language at this alien vessel, which seemed like it understood and was responding perfectly. But then she says something like "suck my dick" or something like that, and he and it didn't respond the way
it didn't get offended.
It didn't get offended, or so they thought.
It didn't know how to respond to it, but it also didn't get offended in any way.
Yeah.
I
So,
mean, it's just the difference between I mean, that was to me the most fascinating thing about the book. Like the theme of the book is understanding,
Mhm.
right? And Siri, the main character, who's had half his brain removed, doesn't understand a lot of things. He's basically, I don't know if you could describe it as like extreme Asperger's,
Yeah.
something like that. He's incapable of understanding emotional cues or even really having emotions. And the alien turns out doesn't understand anything, like really understand anything. It's stimulus response. So it's got lists of rules. How do you respond to certain stimulus? But it doesn't actually understand any of the stimulus it's getting. And I found that fascinating. Yeah, but getting there wasn't that enjoyable for me. But yeah.
Yeah. So I agree with you that was an important aspect of it. I think, and Siri being a reflection of that in a sense. Like, I think that the one part of the story that made my like jaw actually, I think I actually made an audible sound is when Chelsea, Siri's girlfriend, seems to be dying or fading, and she wants him to say something. Just say something. I know it's hard for you. Just say something, and he doesn't say anything. And at the end, he's like, "She thinks I don't care, but the truth is, I couldn't find the right algorithm."
Yeah.
I just like it was like like
Yeah.
because so and again the unreliable narrator thing, but I think what Watts is trying, the point Watts is also trying to make, and I could be misunderstanding this as well, is this idea of what blind sight means. Now, I wrote a quote about what this means somewhere. I should probably look up, but this idea that our brainstem is only, we're seeing some information and not fully processing what we're seeing, or that we're not fully understanding.
That was a really, really interesting part to me. Right. And the first time they go into the alien construct ship, whatever, and something is going on and they know that something is there, but nobody can see it. Or no, Siri was alone, I think. I don't remember the exact details. Siri was alone and there was something there with him. He felt that there was something there with him, but he couldn't see it. And then the explanation was that there's a microsecond lapse in how our brains process what our eyes actually see. And that thing was moving in that moment. Now, I can't explain it. It was complicated, but that these things were actually, as a self-defense mechanism, were moving when our brains were incapable of seeing it, even though the thing was actually there.
Yes,
they weren't invisible. They weren't at all invisible. They were just moving at exactly the right time that our brains were incapable of processing what we saw. And I thought that was absolutely fascinating.
I think there is. I want to say that there, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I've heard of some scientific research about this, that we actually have split-second decision making and reactions to things before we have a conscious decision that we're making it. So in our minds, we think I'm making this conscious decision, but really our bodies and brains are already made that decision.
Yeah.
And that it's one of the arguments I think that people have, that we don't have free will.
Yeah.
I don't know the science behind it, but just from the practicality of it, I can attest to that, because horseback riding, you have to like split second, you have to basically move with your body, react with your body, and like feel when riding the horse, as opposed to being conscious of the decision you're making. Because by the time you're making that conscious decision, you're already past the point of making the decision on what you're going to do with the horse. So I'm sure there's obviously science behind it, like you said, but just kind of reiterating that from a anecdotal perspective.
Yeah, I think there's well. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's kind of like a baseball player deciding to swing. It's like tiny fraction of a second where they're not actually consciously able to do it. They just kind of react to it. So, yeah.
It's the same with a lot of things. I do archery as a hobby, and there's just a moment where you feel that everything's in the right place, and you let go, and you're not consciously thinking, okay, I'll let go now. You're just like, okay, feels right, and you just automatically sort of do it. And I think it's the same with a lot of things.
Yeah, there's actually research that is developing about that when we do tasks like that, like even if it's like pro golfing or music or activities like archery, like you're talking about, that you would think that when people are engaged in those tasks, that they're using higher order thinking in the brain. Like if you think of Bloom's taxonomy, like the highest levels, it's the opposite.
It's the opposite.
Yeah, it's the opposite. They're actually not using nearly as much prefrontal cortex activity as you would think.
Yeah.
That usually is more engaged when you're trying to learn a task and then you're trying to concentrate. But once you know it, it's more like, boom, it's just instinct. It feels more instinctual. So yeah, it's interesting how that's explored. But the other thing that I feel like this book is also exploring is this idea that humans also, whether actively or maybe without being conscious of it, they live with blinders on when it comes to the more challenging issues in life. There's a whole conversation that happens at the end. It says here, and I think this was Sarasti that was saying this to our character Siri. It says, "You rationalize, you defend, you reject unpalatable truths. You can't reject them outright. If you can't reject them outright, you trivialize them. Incremental evidence is never enough for you. You hear rumors of Holocaust, you dismiss them. You see evidence of genocide, you insist it can't be so bad. Temperatures rise, glaciers melt, species die, and you blame sunspots and volcanoes. Everyone is like this, but you most of all. You and your Chinese room. You turn incomprehension into mathematics, you reject truth without even hearing it first." So I thought that was a pretty powerful criticism of not just Siri or character, but I felt like
humanity as a whole.
This is my interpretation of the book, and it could be way off. So I'm willing to change.
There's no correct interpretation to be off about.
Well, it could be. I don't know, but this is how I saw the book. Like I saw the book as in the beginning when these characters like Siri and this former lieutenant Amanda Bates and this person who has a different split consciousness. I don't know if it would be a form of dissociative identity disorder or something else. These different characters that are on this spaceship, I don't want to say like dregs of society, but they're kind of outcasts. I think they even called them alters at one point. So they're more like the outliers. They're not necessarily the norm, is how it was presented in the book. But when you get to, so you almost think that Siri is the most outlier of the biggest outlier out of all of them. He's the most,
except maybe the vampire.
Except maybe the vampire. That's right.
Sarasti was pretty out there.
Sarasti was pretty out there. You're right. But he's the most removed from our norm than anybody else. He's the most inhuman human that's aboard the ship. But by the time we get to the end and into these conversations, I felt like it was flipping things for me. Whereas I was seeing Siri as the biggest outcast in the story and the biggest outcast of humankind, when I got to the very end in these conversations, and also I think with some reveals that Siri gives along the way could support this too, I saw him not as the exception, but almost he's being presented almost like as the emblem of this is what humanity is. This is what we are. We are like Siri, and we just pretend otherwise. This is the most nihilistic interpretation possible. I know, but it's like we think we're so empathetic and we're so concerned about other people and that we have what's right in mind, but really we have our blinders on, and we choose to have our blinders on whether we're conscious of it or not. Maybe we don't even have a choice, and so it like flipped everything for me. And I think part of how that could also be supported is that in the sense that we think of Siri as so out there and different, we also get little bits of information that suggest, I mean, Siri went through some horrible trauma in his younger years. You find out his mother locked him in a bathroom, like that maybe there's actually more humanity there than we realize, but that's just so traumatized. But yeah, I just got this extremely nihilistic view of humanity, and I was like, oh, Siri's not the exception. He's like the emblem. He's the one that's like showing. He's the representative of all of who we actually, or what consciousness actually is. And then the second part of that is that consciousness, I think Watts also shows, again, that intersection between sentience and intelligence, and that we're not necessarily the most intelligent just because we're self-aware. That actually maybe that's more the exception than the norm in the universe as a whole, and it's more like a fluke. It's more like a fluke that we're able to have this experience of being self-aware.
That's kind of what Dave said in the comments there. If you want to highlight his.
Sorry, Dave. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Most of our understanding is processed by our unconscious mind, and is okay, Dave. Yay, and is handed to our conscious mind. We dress things up with our ego person. Sounds like Dave and I. That's exactly how I understood the story. So, yay.
And it also kind of gives all of that kind of discussion and exploration of consciousness and how we think and unconscious, conscious mind and all of that kind of gave the vampire, even though I think the history of the vampires is kind of bizarre, it gave the vampire Sarasti a real place to belong in that whole discussion, because the whole thing with Sarasti was vampires are predators, like deep down predators. They're not human and they function as predators. So their unconscious mind is much more on the surface. Like their unconscious mind is processing who is prey, who is, where am I going to get food, that kind of thing, and then acting straight on it. And it was like this tension through the whole book. Like, is Sarasti just going to lose it and slaughter all of them on the ship? I was kind of expecting that to happen at some point, because so much was built up. First of all, the humans react as prey. They're all kind of intuitively staying away from Sarasti and more comfortable when he's not around and that kind of thing. And then we get into Sarasti's psychology a little bit, and it looks like he's operating on a very unconscious predator kind of level,
Oh, that's interesting. See, I think maybe I need to reread this book someday to appreciate the vampire aspect of the story and how that's integral to what we're exploring here. But yeah, that's really interesting. Did you want to add anything, Josh or Evie?
I was just gonna make a joke about Twilight being a response to Blindsight, but Anyway.
What do you think about my interpretation, Josh? Do you think did you feel differently or anything?
I hadn't. I'll be honest. I hadn't given this book the amount of thought that you have. Once I got through it, I kind of just buried it in my mind, because it wasn't. Because again, it wasn't like I mentioned Solaris. Like Solaris, I kept thinking about that book for weeks and just. Yeah. Kind of the same concept, what is consciousness? This one, it didn't do it for me. So I haven't really given it the same amount of focus and thought.
Yeah, that's completely fair. I think Solaris it's interesting because they are both first contact stories, and they are approaching contact again in a very non-anthropomorphized way, which is really cool and creative when an author can do that. At the same time, I found, and they're both critiques of humanity too, I would say, in different ways. But this one, whereas I feel like Solaris is almost more existential and melancholic. This one is just really nihilistic for me. It's interesting because Carl says, I'm going to go back to Matthew's comment here, but Carl says, Peter Watts and R. Scott Baker are coming from a very similar philosophical set of priors in their works. And I see that. I certainly see that there's a connection there. It feels to me that way as well. Matthew here says, an interesting question is, what does it mean to actually understand? And how would you know when someone actually understands? It is impossible to know. You're not talking to a Chinese room. And I
And
mean, this is what's relevant about the book, and this is why the book might, at least right now, it's relevant because of AI and of the fact that you can have a conversation with an AI bot these days and be totally fooled. I mean, it's getting so good. It's scary. It's really scary.
Yeah, up to a point. I don't know. I'm still I still see AI as being pretty stupid and transparently stupid today. Anyway, I'm sure in 5 years I'll be fooled, but it's so often that you ask ChatGPT or the Google AI summaries and whatever, and like you read it and you're like, but that's wrong.
yeah.
Oh
Like
no, yeah. I mean,
the answers I'm getting from this thing are transparently wrong, and they're being presented with confidence.
well, I mean, I agree with you about like I never trust the Google AI, for example. I've seen so many errors there, but at the same time, there are versions of AI that maybe aren't as like there are different versions of Chat GPT, for example. Like there's even a paid for version. So I think there are actually more advanced levels out there. And I think what
Sure.
made me most frightened was I follow a channel, a music channel. I'm sure that Josh knows about this channel, Rick Beato,
Oh, he's
and
cool.
yeah, he's amazing. He did a video recently uh, showing AI musicians on Spotify. And it
Oh,
was, did you watch that? There
yeah.
was one that he showed where he actually created a song using AI. And of course it's borrowing from different artists. Like it's all stolen material, which is the most annoying thing about it. But it sounded like a real artist and song and singer, and it was terrifying to me that you could listen to that and not realize you're listening to an AI generated musician. So I don't know. I don't know. It's gotten better, and I am kind of concerned that it will continue to get better. Um, but it's just interesting, like what Matthew was saying here. What does it mean to actually understand? How would you know somebody actually understands?
No, and I agree with that. I mean, to go back to my Spanish story, like I got A's. And
Yeah.
I didn't know anything I was saying. I was able to I figured out the formula, like how to answer the questions and how to do all the things, but I didn't know what I was saying.
Yeah, and going back to the AI example, a lot of people are using AI to write their papers and bullying people. I mean, watch Jared Henderson's last video. It's quite terrifying.
Yeah, that was.
How professors are using it. Like it's crazy.
Hey,
Yeah.
we just started our school year and we had professional development, and then one of our sessions with our leadership team, the AP came out and was like, here, and I generated this through ChatGPT, and I was like, we're trying to get the kids not to use it. Why are you using it?
Yeah.
Dave, oh my goodness. So Dave says here, yes, the reveal that all the other characters actually see Siri as the most human character, which they see as something that limits Siri by making him vulnerable to ego-driven self-delusion. Cool. Oh, I'm so grateful for your comments, Dave. I feel like maybe I understood a little bit about the book. There are still some things I don't think I quite understood at the end, but I think Dave is making me feel a little more affirmed in some of my interpretations of what maybe Watts was going for. And then Ariel here says, I loved this book, but it was not the accessible, zippy space opera palette cleanser. No, I wanted
No.
to read. Well, I'm
No,
sorry,
it was
Ariel.
not.
That probably wasn't the best choice between Malaz and Reed. Quite
No.
dense and challenging in its own right.
No,
Yeah.
I can recommend you an accessible zippy space opera palette cleanser if you want, but this isn't it.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know what to expect from this book, to be honest. I didn't realize. I mean, I knew it was exploring consciousness. And I did watch, thanks to Jimmy. Jimmy had sent me a wonderful lecture that Peter Watts gave. So I did have some preparation for this. And one thing that Peter Watts talked about in this lecture, this was years ago, by the way. He sent me this lecture and I watched it. So I watched this Peter Watts lecture a couple years ago. And Peter Watts was talking about this famous conference in 2012 where scientists decided, or you could look this up, but there was some kind of conference where it was decided that animals were sentient, something along those lines. Because before that, there was this idea that animals aren't sentient.
Right.
That consciousness, like sentience, is reserved for humans. And so I find that fascinating because I feel like a lot of people widely accept animals as sentient. And now we're understanding consciousness is far more complex than how we originally thought.
And I would kind of say that some animals can be, but most animals aren't.
Yeah. Evie, are you looking
Myself,
it up?
but
Because I would really appreciate if you did.
I can look it up, sure.
Yeah. Look it up for me. And if you will. But I thought it was interesting because he did bring that up. But yeah, that is interesting, Matt. And I mean, I guess that also the mountain and the sea, I understand that goes into like octopus.
they're remarkable problem solvers.
Mhm.
I don't know if that means they're sentient, but I'm not a professor in anything like any of these subjects, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that
It
was
is
back to
interesting.
the book. That was one of the things. That was one of the things that kind of annoyed me constantly about it. Is I felt like I might have enjoyed the book a lot more if I had 3 PhDs in various subjects that I don't. You know, and it was leaning so heavily into some very complex concepts, and also then garnishing those concepts with a lot of jargon, where I was like, man, I could take 15 minutes and look all of this up and like halfway understand it, but I'm not gonna.
No.
It completely interrupts the flow of my reading to try and achieve any kind. And it would be like one character would go blah 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 blah, and you go, I didn't get any of that. I'm just going to move on. And then there would be nothing for a while, and then another character would be like, yeah, but blah 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 blah. You know, and I'm like, it's just kind of tiring. I think you don't have to, obviously, but I think if you want to not lose the reader as an author, you have to find a way to translate that stuff in your story. You know, have it in there, but then have it explained in some way for the vast majority of your readers who haven't done the research you've done and don't
Yeah.
know what all of this jargon means. You know,
always-
and
There was a
that
lot.
lost me.
There was certainly a lot of jargon.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I always appreciate the scientists that can do that, that can take a high level concept and explain it to the layman that doesn't necessarily understand it. Like Evie, I saw you read another First Contact story. I read another one last month as well. I read Contact by Carl Sagan, and he had some heady concepts, but he explained them for the layman, so I didn't feel lost, at any point like this one. But I guess part of it also might be, who your audience is. Peter Rick Watts might be writing for the people that are super into the high science concepts, but as someone who just doesn't, gravitate to hard science, it's going to lose a reader like me.
He wasn't writing for stupid people like me. That felt clear, and it that I always kind of like, I didn't bounce off of Book of the New Sun. Even though there's a lot of, I'm not sure exactly what's going on in that book, but it's not because of jargon, and it's not because of things that I could research. It's because it's a mysterious world that works in mysterious ways, and it takes a while to really figure it out. So I didn't bounce off of that, but I bounced off of a lot of stuff in this just because I was like, I'm not a scientist, dude. I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm not a, this or that, or I'm not a linguist. I'm not a,
I think for me, it's less about accessibility and more about the author's ability to create an anchor, so to speak. Like I will get through difficult books, quote unquote difficult books, if I have an anchor to like center myself around. And whether that be the prose or a particular character or the world itself. And again, for me, it just wasn't there for BLINDSIGHT, and I can see aspects of it being that anchor for other people. Not that it's hard. I mean, it is a hard sci-fi, but not that it's difficult to read. It's just there's a lot that you have to kind of suspend your disbelief for, ? But I don't know.
Yeah. I'll just go ahead and add here that I did find that conference I was talking about, or the information about it. It's like in 2012, the Cambridge Declaration of Consciousness crystallized a scientific consensus that humans are not the only conscious beings, and that non-human animals, including mammals and birds and many other creatures, including octopuses, possess neurological substrates complex enough to support conscious experiences. The consensus has allowed debates about animal consciousness to move from the old question of whether any non-human animals are conscious to the questions of which animals are conscious and what form their conscious experiences take. So I
Right.
thought that was
Okay.
really cool.
So that fits sort of with my uninformed, intuitive feeling that some animals could be, and many probably aren't. But what do I know? I'm a designer. I'm not a neuroscientist.
Yeah, I did find that this book was. I think what was challenging for me was the most challenging thing for me was the end of the book. I feel like all the twisty things that happen in the plot were a little confusing to me. I feel like I'm terrible when it comes to these plot twists and stuff at the end. When it comes to this idea, if I understand correctly, I want to say that the scrambler or something. What happened with the ship? It seemed like the ship suddenly was taking over, right?
The Theseus, you mean?
Uh-oh. Sorry about that. My husband is making this whole entire contraption in our house for our cat.
Okay.
I hope he's okay. Anyway, sorry, go on.
You mean their ship, the people's ship,
Yeah.
or you mean the alien
Well,
structure?
okay, let me see if I can go back to my notes because it was a little confusing to me what happened at the end. I mean, I know he's taken a ship back to Earth
Yeah.
to give information about what happened, and in that sense, he feels like he is more human. Like he feels like he's become more human as a result of this experiment, which is interesting. And the other thing too. One thing I wanted to quickly say, as you said in the spoiler-free section, Matt, that Siri is an unreliable narrator. There's like a line towards the end where he talks about being an unreliable narrator, as most people are. And to me, like if I had read that line in any other first person narration book, I would have thought it was extremely cliche or trite to say something like that. But coming from Siri and coming from this book where we're talking about the whole nature of human
The whole
consciousness.
book is about perception and understanding. So
Yes.
like he's
And the fallibility.
saying everyone's unreliable and so am I, like, and it
fits.
makes sense in context. Yeah.
It does. I loved it actually in this context.
Yeah.
But as far as, okay, let me see. I'm trying to find my notes. I apologize. Let's see, okay. Oh gosh, what did
I like the cats and sentience talk in the comments.
I don't know. All cats are sentient. Okay, I don't even know let's see. I'm trying to see if I can figure this out without wasting so much time. Okay, so we figured out the scramblers were spies and that their killing their own was a way to drop data. I wrote that down. They're far more evolved than anything on Earth, is what we learned, is that the scramblers, their intelligence are on a far higher level. So this is the interesting thing about intelligence and sentience, again, is this idea that the scramblers and the Rorschach are not self-aware. They're not intelligent the way humans are, or sentient the way humans are sentient. Yet their intelligence far surpasses our intelligence, which is so interesting.
Just because of how they're built. They're like, as one of the things I think I got was just because of how they're built, their thinking is much faster than our brains can biologically actually even transfer thoughts. So they function on a totally different speed than we do, with following instructions and making decisions and stuff like that. I kept thinking the whole time, I don't know if anyone else had this feeling, but I kept thinking the whole time, are these things that the crew has encountered, are they actually the aliens? Or are they just machines that have been sent by the aliens? Like,
Oh,
is
that's
there an
interesting.
alien intelligence somewhere else which has sent these things out into space? Or are these actually, is this actually the alien race or species or whatever, you know?
There was a really confusing, well, what I thought was where I got confused, and everybody else might feel differently, but I thought there was a passage somewhere about the bees and the beehive analogy, and they were
Yeah.
talking about like the scramblers being the bees and the alien vessel being the beehive. But then they said, what if it's flipped, and the scramblers are actually the hive, and the ship is actually like what the bees are? I don't know.
Yeah.
Lost me there. Lost me there a little bit. Okay, sorry. Going on from here, Sarasti tries to make a point about pain and self, and he rips off Siri's hand, or rips Siri's hand. He starts to commit violence against Siri in any case, and he did this very purposefully after taking blood and anti-Euclideans, which are supposed to keep him from going into Grand Mall. A misconception.
I thought that was hilarious as well. He's got a geometric explanation for why crosses affect vampires.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
I was just like, dude, for a bit, I was like, I'm not really getting what exactly you're
Forgot about that.
describing. But then I was like, oh, okay. So if they see certain geometric shapes, it sends them into fits.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
forgot about that. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. A misconception they all have of Siri is that he doesn't feel anything, at least from Siri's point of view. He seems to think he feels things. Siri thinks that's wrong, reflecting on the last moments with Chelsea, which I already talked about. Gosh, I don't know. I guess I didn't write more of the plot. I know I wrote about him somewhere, but I can't seem to figure out. Oh, maybe it's here. Sorry, I wasn't organized with these last points that were confusing to me. But I think, Rorschach implanted. So I got the impression that maybe it implanted a significant change in Bates's brain secretly, and through Bates took control of Theseus. But then again, I also understood this too. What Matt is saying, that because it's explained over and over again that the Theseus is like a self-generating ship, like it grows things and it seems to be conscious in its own way. And
it explicitly had a conscious AI running it.
That's right, the captain or whatever of the ship, AI, and it has like an umbilical cord through Sarasti. Like, is that like some kind of cord or something where Sarasti acted as like an intermediary between the ship? I don't know. That was how I understood it.
There was a lot of stuff with the AI, the captain, and Sarasti, where I was like, I don't feel like I have enough information to understand exactly what's going on there. Like, obviously something's going on there, but I don't really get it. You know, I just didn't really comprehend it.
Yeah, and Sarasti's corpse like ends up still being animated after Bates destroys it. Like, there were so many there were like 5 different twists that happened at the end that I was like, I'm just not totally sure I follow all this.
Yeah.
I feel like I think I understood the bigger things that Watts was doing thematically with the story. But those things I didn't quite follow.
The stuff right at the beginning, there was a lot of sort of setup that I don't feel like I really completely got. Like, they were meant to be going somewhere else, but when they wake up, they're somewhere where they're not meant to be. I guess the AI automatically steered them somewhere else because it detected something. And then there was this big black disc or sphere thing. I was like, I don't have any comprehension at all of what that is. And then this structure started coming out of it with the little flying ships around it. I was like, I'm not really getting this. The point where I started getting it was like, okay, they're going into something. You know, the structure is now there, and they've decided to go inside, and you know, a bunch of weird stuff happens to them because of how the radiation affects their brains and all of that sort of stuff. But before that, I was like, I am not really grasping what's going on.
Do you feel that Watts was maybe making the ending as confusing as possible to confuse the reader so that we felt that? Or is it just our own shortcomings as readers?
I'm willing to own it might have been my shortcoming, but
yeah, that's what I mean. I'm willing to admit I didn't get it all, but
there
I'm
I'm
not alone at the same time.
I had the thought towards the end that maybe Watts is intentionally doing something very smart, because the whole thing is about understanding and comprehension, and he's giving you something that is extremely hard to understand and comprehend. You know, and I thought, okay, if that was very intentionally the goal, I think he did it really well. I just didn't enjoy it very much. You know, it was kind of a hard work, not that enjoyable book.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if somebody tried to sit down and explain to me, this is what happened, and this is what happened, and this is what happened with Sarasti and the ship and Bates, and like I might be like, oh, cool, but I mean, I guess it depends. Maybe I should reserve judgment. Maybe if somebody explained it to me, like X, Y, and B, I'd be like, wow, that was amazing. But right now, I just don't really see.
Yeah,
I don't know that it would be like mind blowing for me personally. We'll see.
I'd like to watch a book report video from someone much smarter than me.
Yeah. Me
Who actually got it all, and then maybe like light bulbs would go off.
No, for me, light bulbs did go off when it came to like what he was doing with the consciousness theme. Like I thought that was so cool.
Yeah,
like the plot stuff was a little bit nebulous to me. And the other thing that was a bit nebulous to me personally was it had to do with some of the world building setup when it came to conversations between himself and Chelsea, because like there was this discussion about like sexual relationships, like how having in-person sex it's no longer a thing in 2082, that it almost it seems primitive. And I'm like, well, how does that work then? Like, I don't know that I fully understood the mechanics of everything when it came to like to that stuff.
I mean, there was the thing with his mother, right? His mother lived in a perfect simulation. So I just assumed, they never went into it that explicitly, but I just assumed that everybody who wanted to have sex, they would have sex with a perfect simulation of what they want. You know,
maybe like AI goggles or something.
Well, no, it's implanted in their brains, as far as I understood, and it's like a complete sensory experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. That pans out. I mean, that makes sense.
I mean, reproduction, obviously, I think then they're doing like artificial insemination, and you know, because there have got to still be more people, but I think just the sex for enjoyment side of things, most people were like, well, I could have messy sex with an actual person, or I could have perfect ideal sex exactly the way I want it with my own brain, basically. That's how I understood it anyway.
Well, I mean, I think that's super interesting. I just it was just a little nebulous in the way that, I mean, he just doesn't really explain it. He just kind of gives you little pieces to make.
Yeah, I think he was hinting at like a trend that we're seeing. I think also more and more that people are using technology to drift further and further away from each other. You know, that you can have less friction in your life, you can have more convenience in your life, you can have less messy in your life through technology, and that becomes the ideal, and then reality more and more becomes unpleasant to be avoided, you know.
Yeah, and that's interesting. That makes sense too, because I mean, and again, if we think at the end about Siri being emblematic of how humanity actually is, rather than the exception, like there is a point. It's so awful. It's awful. But he ends up telling Chelsea at one point that relationships equal mutual rape. That's what a relationship is.
Yeah.
All the calculations of the mind are involved, and you're just trying to you just have selfish means and pretend you have non-selfish desires in order to get your selfish needs met, and that there's an extreme transactional aspect to it, which is very Baker-like too in some ways, I think.
Yeah.
But
I mean, Siri is pretty unreliable.
Yes,
I think.
Very much so.
I don't accept anything that comes out of Siri's mouth, like at face value.
Oh no,
but as wisdom.
Yeah, no. But it does make you wonder too, like you said, how people are avoiding maybe some of the messier aspects of relationships.
Well, and I was kind of fascinated with the whole thing with his mother, like that she has put her body into storage, and her entire experience is happening inside a simulation, and it's perfect, and she's super happy, or at least seems to be super happy. Like later bits with his mother, we get some like, yeah, she's not quite as stably happy as she's pretending to be, but she's chosen this simulation where everything seems perfect over any kind of real life.
It is interesting because those ideas seem very plausible, like where we are as a society and the way things are moving. But he wrote this in 2006.
Yeah,
that was actually kind of prescient from him to kind of study some of these technological advances.
I mean, there was already, like, if you look at William Gibson, Neuromancer, and you look at Neil Stephenson with Snow Crash, there was already a lot of like people being very in a virtual reality stuff, but it was much more science fiction and much more far thinking back then than it is now. It's kind of like, well, yeah, another 5 or 10 years.
Well, as an aside, Ken Liu's short story collection, The Hidden Girl and Other Stories, like almost all of the stories explore AI and consciousness in that way. So if you want another view of that and exploration of that,
I think I would probably like that more, having read Ken Liu's short stories, but not those yet. Yeah, I read the paper.
Very good short story writer. I apologize about my audio, by the way.
Your audio's...
Yeah, it's fine. I'm not sure.
It's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
It's maybe a little echoey, but it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeti mic. I do have the echo setting, like cancellation on. I don't know what to do about that. I apologize.
Yeah. I do wonder if Ken Liu, if he wrote some of those stories, with BLINDSIGHT in mind. Because they're, obviously relatively more recently and or more recent, I should say. So
yeah, it seems to be a book that has gotten a lot of critical praise. Yeah. Which kind of surprised me. I mean, just in the sense that, if you don't really enjoy a book that much, you expect other people didn't either. But
also, it just seems like the most genre. Like a lot of the critical praise is more like literary type stuff rather than specifically genre fiction.
Yeah.
And this is very, very genre fiction.
Well, Elizabeth Bear, who I believe is, I don't know what she's written. I know she's a famous author.
She's written a lot of science fiction, and she is Scott Lynch's wife.
I know that. I knew that she was Scott Lynch's wife,
but
I didn't know what book she has written. I should probably read something by Elizabeth Bear if anybody has recommendations.
I don't think I've ever read anything by her, but I'm aware of her. She's written a lot of.
This year she's won the Hugo and the Shirley Jackson Award.
Dang.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, she's a name. She's definitely a name.
Wait. No, that was Watts. The introduction is from Bear.
Yeah, she wrote the introduction.
It must be important. It's a tour essential. So it's like a newer version of it with her introduction. And usually when they get people to do introductions, it's because it's a important work. So
yeah. I want to say that when I watched that particular lecture by Watts, which Evie wrote in the chat earlier, the name of something with ants in the title, that I want to say that he said this, and I apologize if I remembering this, but I want to say that he said that his book was being read in certain science classes and being discussed. So that's pretty cool. Like, good for him. It certainly has received a lot of attention. It seems like even though this will not appeal to the masses. I will. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. When it comes to the general masses, if you're a hard science fiction, for those who are hard science fiction fans, I could certainly see this as a must read. For people who are hard sci-fi fans or really into the consciousness exploration, this could be a gem of a book. But I think when it comes to like at least our corner, I don't know.
Yeah, if you've got a very sciencey mind and you're deep in some scientific subjects, it's probably more enjoyable.
Yeah. But Dave says here, I think you guys are right about the end being intentionally confusing. Siri is our point of view character, and it turns out he was missing the point about a lot of things, mission and personal life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also thought it was interesting, like Siri's, at least what Siri perceives his job to be, that he's purely an observer and he's trying not to influence anything he's observing, which like seems kind of partially ridiculous to me. Like, especially if you're talking about like quantum science, like any observer observing changes what you're observing, just sort of automatically, even if you're not actually hands-on messing with things. Just the presence of someone who's observing changes it. And I thought that, to me, that was really obvious. Like the first time he brings up that he's not allowed to mess with things, it's like, dude, you went into the alien spaceship and the aliens perceived you. Like that is going to change the situation in the alien spaceship, whether you're doing things or not. Like, of course you're active, or you're influencing at least the situation just by being there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think as Matthew said, I think that this book was probably revolutionary when it came out.
Sure.
And I do think, like I said, I do think some of the ideas like can transfer to today in some ways. And I don't know. I have to admit, there's part of me that does appreciate, and I think Solaris does a similar thing in a way, like looking at our human consciousness and how we think we're just the best thing in the entire universe, and maybe putting us under a microscope and saying that there's far more that we don't know, and there's far more out there that we might be microcosms of something else. I don't know, just looking at it in a different way.
I like a first contact story that points out humanity's arrogance.
There you go. Arrogance. Yes.
Which is, I mean, it's pretty common theme, I think, in first contact stories. Like, you're not all that, humanity.
That's true. I actually feel like most first contact stories are like that, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, rarely. That's what I thought was really interesting about this one. Like some of them, it's really clear that the point is the aliens are better than you. You know, like humanity's not all that. The aliens are pretty hot, and you know, get over yourself, humanity. This one, it didn't feel like that, because it's like, well, we're sentient, or at least we tell ourselves we are. And as far as we can understand the sentience of the aliens, they are not sentient. You know, so in that way, you could say inferior, maybe, but they also are vastly more intelligent, like functionally intelligent than we are. So yeah, actually better than us, maybe.
Oh, I think he's saying that that's better than us. I feel like he's looking at sentience and saying that, like, what is it? Elizabeth Bear brings this up in her introduction, but it also comes out in one of the quotes in the book, which is, "What is consciousness good for?" Like, what is this? So what?
Somebody, I forget who. Somebody, I think it was Dave, commented earlier, like much earlier, that that consciousness is basically a high energy parasite.
Mm-hmm.
It just costs us a lot and doesn't give us that much for it. I don't know. I like being conscious.
I do too.
I
Yeah.
don't just want to be functional.
Yeah. Like I have this quote here. It says here, I began to realize, let's see, all of them I began to realize had missed the point. All of those theories, all of those drug dreams and experiments and models trying to prove what consciousness was, none to explain what it was good for, none needed. Obviously, consciousness makes us what we are. It lets us see the beauty and the ugliness. It elevates us into the exalted realm. But it kind of goes on from there, and it just makes it. There's also like more that explains that it's really pointless. Like it doesn't really. It's like a flaw in the universe. Like it's almost like a fluke that humans have this thing called consciousness, and it doesn't really do much good because of the blind sight, because of the fact that we have this brain that this consciousness that operates on its own accord and ignores unpalatable truths, that we're just going to go on killing each other anyway. Like because the series going back to Earth, and I think that genocide is happening on Earth, so it's like we never learn anyway. Is the idea that I got. We're not evolving.
And I mean, I think it was a very groundbreaking book because, as far as I know, and I mean, I haven't read by any means every First Contact story, but I've never read a First Contact story where the aliens, where the humans figure out that the aliens are not conscious.
Yeah.
Like they have a consciousness or a mind, or they function in a way that is so alien. Like it's always like, yeah, they're conscious, but they think different than we do in some way. But like this is maybe the first one. I don't know. Maybe someone in the chat is better read in First Contact stories than I am, but it's certainly the first one I've ever heard of where it turns out they're not actually conscious. And maybe that's better than being conscious. You know, it's functionally better, or it's more efficient, or, you know, whatever. And that was discussed a fair bit in the book.
Yeah. No, I think that's such a solid point, Matt. I can't think of another book that has explored consciousness in that specific way. Right. Hello, Fitz.
Speaking of not conscious.
No. So Simon says here, being unconscious is also good, but being conscious is better for getting through my TBR.
Yes.
Yes.
I totally agree.
And then Dave says, I think of the book as sci-fi horror. Yes, yes, yes. And not because of the vampires. I 100% agree with this. This to me, I actually wrote that down at some point. I was like, this is going to be almost like the tone of a horror book, like psychological horror.
Yeah.
And the ending when Siri thinks thinks his might be the only consciousness left in the universe. Yeah, that's a terrifying thought.
Well, and also just the sort of implied extension of what happens in the book. Like, these aliens are what they are, and what we've experienced of them, humanity's not going to be able to stop them. Right? If their plan includes going to Earth and flattening it, humanity's just going to be screwed. You know, they're so far beyond us in so many ways that probably this First Contact is going to, or could lead to something like that, you know?
Yeah, interesting. And then Jerome said Solaris maybe, and I think that's like...
Yeah, no, that's true.
I mean, yeah, it could be. And at the same time, I feel like with Solaris, yeah, it could be for sure. I think it's a little bit more open in terms of interpretation of whether that consciousness is sentient or not. Whereas in this book, it's far more conclusive, in my opinion. But
yeah, it's very much more than Solaris. It's very much discussed in the book. Like the characters are trying very hard to figure out, and they come to the conclusion that, you know, it's not conscious.
Yeah.
Or sentient or whatever. Yeah.
This is quite an interesting exploration to me. I thought, even though it's interesting. I have some mixed feelings about the book, but I want to lean more positive for some odd reason. Even though I don't think I'll be reading the sequel, by the way.
I know what you mean. Like I was making excuses for the book afterwards. Like, oh, I think he's definitely doing some really interesting things and whatever, but like I couldn't get around the fact that I just didn't really enjoy it very much. It's doing some totally interesting things, no question, and it's well written.
Yeah.
And possibly if I understood the scientific jargon better, and was more familiar with all of the concepts that it's dealing with, I probably would have enjoyed it more. But as it was, I just didn't really enjoy it very much.
Oh, yeah. All right, closing thoughts. Thank you both, or actually not all three of you, I'm sorry, for joining me for this discussion today. Let's go ahead and just get some closing thoughts to end the discussion, though. Evie, we haven't heard from you in a while.
I'm just here to moderate on screen, and that's it. Yeah, no, hopefully next quarter's book is going to be much better for me, and I will have more thoughts.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that you charged through the audiobook for this discussion regardless. Yeah, and then Matt, do you want to give any closing thoughts here?
Yeah, I mostly said it all. I think he was doing some really interesting stuff. I think it was probably a somewhat groundbreaking book in its time, like 19 years ago.
2006, 19 years ago? Oh, God.
Ouch. Yeah, I know. Tell me about it. I don't regret having read it, even though I didn't enjoy it really. I will definitely not be continuing with the series. But yeah, I'm kind of glad I read it. I think it's an interesting, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in it. And I think it was probably an interesting sort of time in scientific writing, science fiction writing's history as well. So yeah.
I think Jerome recommended something shorter, The Freeze Frame Revolution by Peter Watts.
Yeah, I saw that.
If there's any intention of reading more Watts, not necessarily continuing.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a very hard time pushing myself to read more of an author if I don't enjoy the thing I read. It's not always indicative, like one book representing everything they ever wrote, but
you have to have that twinkle to be like, I see the enjoy.
There are so many books that I know I'm going to enjoy more than probably anything Watts ever wrote. So thanks for the recommendation though, Jordan.
Yeah, thank you, Jerome.
Yeah, it may work for somebody. Yeah, I'm going to echo something you said earlier, Joanna, is I think and I mentioned on my review this morning as well, is that if you're really into hard sci-fi, this may be like your book. This may be a great book for you. That's not me, so it wasn't a book for me. And I won't be continuing either. I did look at the kind of the description of the sequel because I was just curious, and it doesn't really follow Siri. I think it like follows his father or something, and it's like a difference. So it doesn't sound like it's necessarily a direct sequel anyway. Not that I necessarily want to read the sequel anyway, but yeah, I mean, I mentioned I did like a lot of this. I was just, I don't know, I guess the accumulation of the hard sci-fi elements just caught up with me, and then I kept waiting for, this big, profound thing to happen, and it didn't really happen for me, at least. So, but I don't regret it either, even if I've forgotten half of it, and like 6 months from now, I won't remember any of it.
Yeah. Well, I'll finish by saying that I think I am the most positive about this book because I have actually thought about it quite a few times since finishing it. Certain parts of it, specifically just the themes of it. The characters were not quite as memorable for me, but there were certain moments that I thought about. And if it tells you anything, like I did this review and I have like all these quotes printed out from the story that I thought were intriguing. I appreciate, even though I don't necessarily agree with the perspective that's being established here, I appreciated the way it was handled again in a fictional context, and the way that I think the way Watts structured the book, although it wasn't easy, it was challenging. I think it served the story from what I can gather. I think he actually, the way he wrote the story supported what he was exploring. And so I have an appreciation for this book. It wasn't a favorite of all time for me, but it's something that I'm glad I read. I won't be reading the sequel, but yeah, I just regret that Fireside as a whole, I think, was a little bit more negative about this book. It seems like Tyrone seemed to like
It's
it.
all Joanna's fault.
I know.
No, it's Fireside's fault.
It's the
picked-
Fireside's fault. They
like-
they voted for it. They voted for it. Damn you, Fireside people.
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm actually really grateful to have read it. Watts is good if you're the sort of person who reads popular science articles about cognitive science, like Daniel Dennett or Sam Harris. I went through a phase where I was interested, like deeply interested in the exploration of consciousness. I'm not the most scientifically minded person, though, so that made the book a bit of a challenge for me. But again, I really like the way it was presented. I really like the exploration and the way it was presented. Even though the plot twisty things went over my head. So yes, I guess that's where I land, and that's where everybody else lands here. So I appreciate you all joining us for the first ever Fireside Book Club pick. I'm so excited for the next one. Do we know when voting will start for the next?
I was going to ask off screen once we went off live when we want to do that. So.
It's quarterly.
Mhm.
So I was thinking, what is the next quarter? Starts September, doesn't it?
October.
Off to this Friday.
October. Yeah. So I think late September we will get our nominations together, and then right at the beginning, like the last week of September, probably we could do the vote and then start reading in October,
A little earlier, so we have time to get the book.
or a little earlier. Yeah.
That's right.
Probably
Yeah,
like
exactly.
maybe end of August is we'll get the books and then have the
Yeah.
vote by the first week of September. I think that's
Yeah.
what we did last time.
We will definitely announce it on the Fireside. So anyone on the Fireside, you will get an everyone ping, probably from the Fireside Book Club channel, and we'll have a vote, and we'll have a week, roughly, probably for the vote, and then we'll start reading in October.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you all again so much for joining us. And
Yep.
just highlighting the last comments here. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
See you, everybody.